The original Paper Mario was quite a bit disappointing to me. It's yet another case of finding a game to be worse off than my childhood memories had me believe. As for its sequel, The Thousand Year Door, it's not perfect by any means, but it's astonishing how much of an overall improvement it is. Honestly, if Bug Fables didn't already exist, I'd be pissed if no one else had given this style a serious shot. But as it stands, Thousand Year Door is simply really good at what it does. It's just too bad that its flaws do manage to bring it down. The story begins with Princess Peach acquiring a mysterious treasure map in the sketchy town of Rogueport. Since she doesn't trust herself to find the treasure on her own, she mails Mario the map and an invitation to go treasure hunting with her. Upon arriving in Rogueport, however, Peach is nowhere to be found, and a band of evil weirdos known as the X-Nauts are attacking the local citizenry. One thing leads to another, and it's determined that by following the treasure map, Mario will find Peach, uncover the mystery behind the X-Nauts, and ultimately open the legendary Thousand Year Door. The general pacing is similar to the first Paper Mario, complete with individual chapters that all focus on their own subplots. Chapter 1 has Mario battling a dragon that's terrorizing the town of Petalburg, while Chapter 3 has Mario rising through the ranks of an organized combat arena, each one leading to a crystal star, which all act as the keys to opening the titular Thousand Year Door. While the general progression is similar, the writing is anything but. The entire story is extremely well written and enjoyable. I cannot emphasize enough how every single character, from those important to the story to just random people in the background, they all have distinct personalities and are memorable in their own ways. The original Paper Mario was so stale that it quickly got boring, but Thousand Year Door is a night and day difference in this regard. I didn't really care for what Goombario had to say in the previous game, but Goombella in the sequel actually has a bit of an attitude, and a lot of her dialogue is funny. The same goes for all of Mario's partners and the rest of the supporting cast. Each of them develops and grows as they go through their own little story arc, and it does a great job at fleshing out the world. When you get down to it, the story isn't anything too special, but the writing really does manage to carry the whole thing. The visual presentation already looked good in the first Paper Mario, but the sequel is a gorgeous game that still holds up today. Aside from being much cleaner and less pixelated, it just feels like there's so much more depth and character to the world, if that makes any sense. The game also loves to flood the screen with a ton of characters at once. They do this constantly, and it does look pretty cool. The pop-up book and diorama style of the first game is replaced with a live stage, complete with an audience. I'll get a little more into that later on. This is also the first game in the series that starts to get carried away with the whole paper aesthetic. Mario has to turn, roll, and fold himself in various ways in order to access certain areas and solve puzzles. And you do this a lot. If anyone's annoyed at how the later games love to have paper jokes, I'd say that Thousand Year Door is the one that really began to sow those seeds. Not that I hate any of this though, I think it all works out just fine for what it is. What I would argue is not fine for what it is the backtracking. This was a complaint I had with the first game, but the sequel gets really carried away with this stuff. It is ridiculous how much walking back and forth there is in this game. The amount of times that you have to walk from Twilight Town to Creepy Steeple and back again comes off like a joke. You have to walk the entire path at least 5 times. It's just so unnecessary how many times you have to go up and down the same road. And it's mandatory to progress the story. They really couldn't just add a pipe right outside of Creepy Steeple to act as a shortcut? Twilight Town might be the worst example, but every chapter's got it. They all find some stupid excuse to waste your time. Chapter 6, for example, has no combat for extended periods. You just run up and down this train over and over again, talking to people and searching for items to collect. A lot of it feels like they're padding out the game. I get that part of the point is they're trying to show that it's a really long train ride that takes a total of 3 days to go through, but I also feel like it interrupts the gameplay too much. I mean, again, this was already bad in the first game, but it is freaking absurd in this one. At least Thousand Year Door does hit the ground running. For one thing, you start the game already being able to do the action commands. There is a tutorial early on, and it explains everything very succinctly. What took like an hour and a half to get through in Paper Mario is handled in about the first 15 to 20 minutes in Thousand Year Door. And every single aspect of the game's combat is vastly improved upon. The variety of enemies and party members was already good in the first game, but the sequel does it even better. The badge balancing was a huge complaint of mine, but it's been greatly remedied in Thousand Year Door. Quick Change is still crazy powerful, and you can get it very early in this game too. But most of the badges overall are now significantly cheaper to equip, and you have a lot more freedom in customizing Mario's playstyle. Furthermore, the maximum limit for badge points is increased from 30 to 99, which maybe that's a little too much, but I'd much rather have it like this than how the N64 game did it. I also think that the HP Plus and FP Plus badges are a little too cheap to equip at only 3 points each, but again, the balancing overall is a massive improvement this time. I don't feel like I'm so limited or I need to switch out badges in between select fights. I can just play the way I want to play, as it should be. Aside from the customization aspect, the combat itself has seen great improvements too. It's still mostly the same idea. Enemies chase after you on the field, and initiating an attack gives you an advantage in battle, just like before. Guarding against enemy attacks with good timing is still here, but newly added is the riskier Super Guard, which has far stricter timing, but is a good option to have in case you're desperate. There are also newly added stylish commands. With additional button presses during attacks, you can pull off acrobatic tricks to raise your star power and unleash Mario's most powerful attacks. And yes, those Star Spirit moves are back again, and they're just as overpowered. This time, they require some mini-games to get the most use out of those abilities, but it's really easy to pull off, and once again, the first one you get and the cheapest one to use heals you for a good amount and cures all status ailments. So we're back to another issue the original had. Items are basically worthless. Seriously, I rarely had to use items for the entire game. What's even the point? Like I said earlier, Thousand Year Door has a stage play vibe to it, but it's more of a silly gimmick than anything else. The size of your audience determines how much star power you get to use those super moves, but it never seemed to make a big difference either way. Audience members can also throw items at you, either to help or hinder you, but again, it never really meant much. There's also this weird slot machine that shows up randomly and can fully restore your health or flower points. It's totally unnecessary and only makes the game even easier than it already is. These aspects don't make the combat worse per se, but I do feel like they don't really add anything to the game. That said, it is awesome when the audience gets directly involved in a boss fight, although this is a rare occurrence. The biggest addition to the combat, by far, is the revamped party system. Mario's partners now have their own health to keep track of, and it's a viable strategy to put them in the front row and defend Mario, or vice versa. It opens up some depth to the combat, but not nearly as much as I would like. Simply do one of the healing Crystal Star abilities and Mario and his current partner are back to tip-top shape. But hey, I'll take it. It's still way better than Paper Mario 1. There's also more bonus content this time around, although it's not too big of a deal. Most of it revolves around the Trouble Center, a long list of optional side quests. I normally don't like to complain about optional content because, by its very nature, it's optional, but very few of these side quests are actually worth anything. This is basically a retread of doing favors for Koopa Koot from Paper Mario, and that has the same issue. It just feels like busy work. Rarely is there a unique battle or interesting story segment. There are also some minigames too, which can lead to their own reward. But the real draw here is the Pit of 100 Trials, a marathon of about 85 or so fights. The difficulty largely depends on when you enter, with the whole thing definitely coming off as an endgame challenge. That's why it sucks that the first 50 floors are so slow and boring. It does start to ramp up halfway through, and the last few floors are brutally difficult. The boss at the end of it all is no slouch either, although still nothing crazy. This just isn't a very challenging game, it is what it is. I don't mean to cut this short, but there's not a whole lot else for me to say. I do think Thousand Year Door has too many linear hallways, but it does have several cool dungeons too, so the level design overall is at least decent. There's no Junior Troopa this time around, unfortunately. He was a consistent rival who kept showing up to battle Mario, and it's a shame they didn't replace him with someone else. It would have been great if Bowser took that role this time, but he's instead been regulated to some comedic side stories and not much else. For the most part, this is basically just Paper Mario all over again. But the substantially better writing, the way better badge balancing, and the improvements made to combat all go a long way to making this a very good game. It's still a kid's game, and actually a decent choice for beginners of the RPG genre. But anyone who's more serious isn't going to find a whole lot to grab onto here. That said, it's still an engaging and enjoyable game from start to finish. And I give this a strong recommendation to anyone who's interested. And after you play through Thousand Year Door, I say don't even bother with the first Paper Mario. Just go straight to Bug Fables, because seriously, that game is amazing. Thanks for watching my review on Paper Mario: The Thousand Year Door. And thanks to my good friend at One Doom Game Critic. This is a really expensive game to buy a physical copy of these days, so I'm grateful that he lent me his own personal copy for this review. Check out his YouTube channel, he's got some really good stuff.